The locksmith finished installing the new deadbolt on what used to be my front door, while inside, my ex-husband Marcus was probably explaining to his girlfriend why the locks had mysteriously changed overnight. What neither of them realized was that every rent payment she thought she was making to him was actually going straight into an account I controlled, because despite everything that had happened, my name had never been removed from the property deed. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The unraveling of my 12-year marriage began on a humid Wednesday afternoon in late September. I had returned early from my job at the Portland architectural firm where I worked as a senior project coordinator, my briefcase heavy with blueprints for the new medical complex we were designing in the Pearl District. The contemporary house in the West Hills had been our pride and joy for nearly a decade, purchased when Marcus's engineering consulting business and my steady architectural salary had finally made home ownership in one of Portland's most desirable neighborhoods possible. Pulling into our circular driveway, I expected to find the house empty as usual. Marcus typically spent Wednesday afternoons at the country club, either playing golf with potential clients or attending the networking events that had become increasingly important to his business development strategy. Instead, I noticed an unfamiliar silver BMW parked in the spot where I usually left my car, forcing me to park on the street like a visitor to my own home. The sound of music drifting from our backyard caught my attention as I approached the front entrance. It wasn't the classical compositions Marcus and I usually played during our evening wine sessions, but something with a heavy bass line and lyrics I couldn't quite make out. More puzzling was the sound of female laughter punctuating the music, bright and carefree in a way that seemed oddly intimate for a Wednesday afternoon business meeting. Setting my briefcase down quietly in the marble foyer, I moved through our open-concept living space toward the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the pool area. The scene that greeted me through the glass made my chest tighten with a confusion that would soon crystallize into devastating clarity. Marcus was lounging on one of our teak pool chairs, a beer in his hand and his shirt unbuttoned in the casual way he usually reserved for weekend barbecues with close friends. Beside him, in a bikini that left little to the imagination, was a woman I had never seen before. She appeared to be in her late 20s, with sun-streaked blonde hair and the kind of effortless tan that suggested either excellent genetics or significant time spent poolside. Her laugh was the sound I had heard from the front yard, warm and frequent as she responded to whatever Marcus was saying with obvious delight. What struck me most forcefully wasn't just the presence of this stranger in our private space, but the way Marcus was looking at her. His expression held an intensity I recognized from the early days of our relationship, when he used to hang on my every word with the same fascination now directed at this young woman. She was telling some animated story, using her hands expressively while Marcus leaned forward with complete attention, occasionally laughing in a way that seemed genuinely spontaneous rather than politely social. The woman moved through our outdoor space with a familiarity that suggested this wasn't her first visit to our home. She knew where we kept the pool towels, helped herself to drinks from the outdoor refrigerator, and adjusted the umbrella angle without asking permission. When she stood to dive into the pool, Marcus watched her with undisguised appreciation, his eyes following her movements in a way that made my stomach clench with recognition. I remained frozen behind the window, simultaneously wanting to confront them immediately, and desperate to understand the full scope of what I was witnessing. The casual intimacy between them suggested a relationship that extended far beyond a single afternoon encounter. When the woman emerged from the pool and Marcus handed her a towel, their fingers lingered together longer than necessary. When she sat back down, she chose the chair closest to his, their knees almost touching as they resumed their conversation. Their discussions seemed to center around travel plans and weekend activities, with references to places they had apparently visited together and future trips they were planning. Marcus mentioned a conference in San Francisco where he had recently presented, and the woman laughed about something that had happened at the hotel bar, clearly indicating she had been there with him. The pieces of a larger picture were falling into place, each detail adding weight to the growing realization that my husband had been living a double life. The woman introduced herself to someone on a phone call as Jessica, speaking with the confident ease of someone comfortable in her surroundings. She mentioned needing to pick up some things from her apartment later, but referred to Marcus's schedule as though it were partially her own, asking when he expected to be finished with his evening client calls, and whether they should order dinner from the Italian place they had apparently visited together multiple times. Marcus's responses revealed planning and consideration that extended far beyond a casual affair. He asked about her work schedule for the following week, mentioned needing to coordinate their plans around a family dinner I had no knowledge of, and discussed logistical details about airport pickups and meeting times that suggested an ongoing, organized relationship rather than spontaneous encounters. The realization that this wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment, but a sustained emotional and physical relationship hit me with surprising force. Marcus had been distant for months, a change I had attributed to stress from expanding his consulting practice and the general challenges of maintaining a long-term marriage. Our conversations had become increasingly perfunctory, focused on household logistics and social obligations rather than personal thoughts and shared interests. Physical intimacy between us had declined to occasional, obligatory encounters that left both of us feeling more isolated than connected. When I had suggested marriage counseling several months earlier, Marcus had dismissed the idea as an overreaction to normal relationship cycles, insisting that work pressures were temporary and that we just needed to weather this busy period together. Now I understood that his emotional energy had been redirected elsewhere, leaving only the shell of our partnership intact. The sound of their conversation grew more personal as the afternoon progressed. Jessica was sharing details about her family and childhood, stories that Marcus received with the kind of interesting questioning that indicated genuine emotional investment. He told her things about his own background that I thought I had exclusive knowledge of, family stories and personal experiences that had once felt like intimate sharing between spouses, but were apparently being offered to someone else with equal openness. When Jessica mentioned having some difficulty with her landlord and concerns about her lease renewal, Marcus's response made my blood run cold. He suggested she shouldn't worry about housing security because they were spending so much time together anyway, and that he had plenty of space if she ever needed somewhere more permanent to stay. The casual way he offered access to our shared home, as though I were merely an inconvenient obstacle rather than his wife and co-owner of the property, revealed how completely he had detached from our marriage. Jessica's reaction was practical rather than romantic, asking about logistics like parking and storage space for her belongings. Marcus assured her that those details could be easily worked out, that the house was large enough to accommodate her needs, and that he could handle any concerns about the arrangement. Their conversation continued with discussions about converting one of our guest rooms into an office space for her freelance graphic design work, and whether the backyard had enough privacy for the yoga practice she apparently maintained. Listening to them plan a future that involved my home while I stood hidden in my own living room, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. The hurt and betrayal were certainly present, but they were accompanied by a cold clarity about what needed to happen next. Marcus had made his choice about what he wanted, and now I needed to make mine. The difference was that I possessed information he didn't have, information that would prove crucial in the weeks to come. That evening, after Jessica had left and Marcus had returned to his normal routine of working late in his home office, I began researching property laws and divorce attorneys in Oregon. What I discovered filled me with grim satisfaction. Since we had purchased the house during the early years of our marriage, using primarily my savings from my architectural work as the down payment, and since I had insisted on being the primary name on the deed for tax purposes, I held significantly more legal claim to the property than Marcus realized. More importantly, Oregon's property laws would require Marcus to either buy out my share of the house or agree to sell it entirely, with me entitled to the majority of the equity we had built together. The house had appreciated dramatically since our purchase, meaning my share would provide substantial resources for starting over. The irony was exquisite. Marcus's plan to install his mistress in our home would ultimately fund my escape from both of them. The following days brought an uncomfortable period of maintaining normal appearances while processing the knowledge of Marcus's betrayal. Every conversation felt like a performance, every shared meal like a charade. When he asked about my day or commented on household matters, I had to resist the urge to reveal what I knew, saving my evidence for the moment, when it would have maximum impact. Marcus's patterns became more obvious once I knew what to look for. The phone calls he took privately in his office, the sudden increases in evening meetings that kept him away from home, the weekend business trips that seemed to require more elaborate explanations than they had in the past. He had become careless in his deception, confident that I was too trusting or too distracted by my own work to notice the inconsistencies in his stories. 2 weeks after my initial discovery, I decided to work from home on a day when Marcus believed I would be visiting our project sites across town. My plan was straightforward: to understand the full extent of what was happening in my own home and to gather enough evidence to protect my interests when I decided to act. I positioned myself in the second-floor office with a clear view of our driveway, my laptop open with architectural drawings displayed in case Marcus returned unexpectedly. Jessica arrived shortly after lunch, this time carrying what appeared to be grocery bags and an overnight case. She used her own key to enter through the front door, a detail that hit me with fresh waves of betrayal. Marcus had given her independent access to our home without my knowledge or consent, making her complicit in the violation of our shared space. From my vantage point upstairs, I could hear her moving through our kitchen with the confidence of someone who belonged there, unpacking groceries and beginning what sounded like meal preparation. Marcus returned home earlier than usual, something he rarely did when he knew I would be out of the house, further confirming that these visits were carefully coordinated around my schedule. The sounds of their reunion drifted upward through the house: warm greetings, casual conversation about their respective days, and the easy laughter of people who had developed genuine comfort with each other. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now back to where we left off. Their discussion over the meal Jessica had prepared revealed details about their relationship that made the scope of Marcus's deception even more painful. They talked about plans for the upcoming weekend, upcoming social events they would attend together, and mutual friends they had apparently made as a couple. Jessica mentioned her concerns about an upcoming gallery opening where she would be displaying some of her design work, and Marcus offered encouragement and practical support with the same enthusiasm he had once shown for my professional achievements. The conversation took a more serious turn when Jessica mentioned her lease ending in 6 weeks and her uncertainty about finding a new apartment that would accommodate both her budget and her need for a workspace. Marcus's response confirmed my worst fears. He suggested she consider moving in permanently, explaining that they were practically living together already and that the house had more than enough room for both her personal and professional needs. Jessica's response was measured and practical, asking about financial arrangements and household responsibilities. Marcus assured her that money wouldn't be a concern, that he could handle the mortgage and utilities while she contributed what she felt comfortable with toward groceries and incidentals. They discussed converting our guest suite into a combined bedroom and studio space for her work, and whether the formal dining room could be transformed into a gallery area for displaying her art. Hearing them plan to restructure my home to accommodate their future together while I crouched on the stairs like an intruder in my own house crystallized my resolve. Marcus had made his choice, and now I would make mine. The difference was that I held legal advantages he didn't know existed, advantages that would prove decisive in the confrontation to come. The next several weeks transformed me into a detective in my own life, carefully documenting patterns and gathering evidence while maintaining the facade of an unsuspecting wife. I began paying attention to details that had previously escaped my notice. The way Marcus guarded his phone during dinner, the sudden appearance of new cologne that I hadn't purchased, the frequency with which he volunteered for business trips that seemed to require extended stays in nearby cities. My work schedule provided perfect cover for my investigations. As a senior project coordinator, I often had legitimate reasons to adjust my hours or work remotely, giving me flexibility to observe Marcus's behavior when he thought I was safely occupied elsewhere. I started photographing inconsistencies: restaurant receipts for 2 people on evenings when he claimed to be in solo client meetings, credit card charges for expensive gifts during weeks when he had supposedly been too busy for personal shopping. The technological aspect of modern infidelity made Marcus's deception easier to track than he probably realized. Our shared cell phone plan allowed me to access detailed billing information that revealed patterns of communication I had never bothered to examine before. The frequency of calls and texts to Jessica's number created a clear timeline of when their relationship had intensified, showing a dramatic increase in contact beginning about 8 months earlier. More revealing were the location services we had enabled for practical reasons, like finding lost phones or coordinating pickups. Marcus's device history showed regular visits to an apartment complex in the Southeast Division that corresponded with times when he had claimed to be working late or attending networking events. Cross-referencing these locations with his stated schedule revealed a systematic pattern of deception that had been ongoing for nearly the entire duration of their relationship. I hired a private investigator named Rachel Torres, a former police detective who specialized in matrimonial cases, and had been recommended by one of my colleagues who had gone through a difficult divorce the previous year. Rachel's initial consultation revealed strategies for documentation that I wouldn't have considered, from establishing clear timelines of Marcus's movements to gathering evidence that would hold up in legal proceedings. Rachel's surveillance confirmed what I had already suspected, but provided professional documentation that would be crucial for divorce proceedings. Her photographs showed Marcus and Jessica together at restaurants, art galleries, and weekend trips to the Oregon coast that he had described to me as solo business retreats. More importantly, her investigation revealed that Jessica had been staying at our house regularly for several months, essentially living there whenever I was out of town for work conferences or visiting my sister in California. The financial investigation that Rachel conducted was particularly illuminating. Marcus had been using our joint credit cards to fund his relationship with Jessica, paying for dinners, weekend getaways, and expensive gifts that I had assumed were business expenses or purchases for our household. The amounts weren't enormous individually, but they added up to thousands of dollars over the months of their relationship, money that had been diverted from our shared resources to support his infidelity. More concerning was Rachel's discovery that Marcus had taken out a personal loan using our house as collateral without my knowledge or signature. The loan, for $30,000, had been processed through a lender that apparently had relaxed documentation requirements, and Marcus had used his status as co-owner of the property to secure the funds. When I reviewed the loan documents that Rachel obtained through her professional contacts, I realized that Marcus had been planning for Jessica's permanent presence in our home much longer than I had realized. The loan proceeds had been used to finance renovations to our guest suite and home office, improvements that I had assumed were Marcus's surprise gift to enhance our living space but were actually designed to create a comfortable environment for Jessica's residency. The timeline of the renovations corresponded exactly with the intensification of their relationship, meaning that Marcus had been using our shared equity to prepare our home for his mistress while lying to me about his motivations. This financial deception provided additional legal leverage that my attorney was eager to exploit. Oregon law took a dim view of spouses who used marital assets to support extramarital relationships, and the loan Marcus had secured would actually strengthen my claim to the property while potentially making him liable for fraud. The money he had borrowed against our house to finance his betrayal would ultimately work in my favor during divorce proceedings. Rachel's investigation also revealed details about Jessica's background that explained some of her motivations for pursuing a relationship with a married man. She was currently between apartments due to financial difficulties, having been evicted from her previous residence for non-payment of rent. Her freelance graphic design work was sporadic and poorly paid, leaving her in a precarious financial situation that made Marcus's stability and resources particularly attractive. Jessica's social media presence painted a picture of someone desperate to project success and affluence despite her actual circumstances. Her Instagram account featured carefully curated images of expensive dinners, luxury shopping trips, and exotic locations that were clearly funded by someone else's resources. Many of the locations in her posts were recognizable as places Marcus had taken me during our marriage, suggesting that she was essentially retracing our relationship milestones while presenting them as her own experiences. The psychological profile that emerged from Rachel's investigation was of someone who viewed relationships primarily as opportunities for financial and social advancement. Jessica's previous boyfriends had all been significantly older and more financially established than her, and her pattern was to become involved with men who could provide immediate lifestyle improvements rather than partners with whom she might build something mutual and lasting. This information helped me understand that Marcus wasn't just having an affair, but was being systematically manipulated by someone who had identified him as a mark for financial exploitation. Jessica's interest in moving into our house wasn't romantic but practical. She needed housing and had found someone willing to provide it. Her encouragement of Marcus's plans to leave me wasn't based on love, but on her desire to secure permanent access to the lifestyle our marriage had made possible. Armed with this knowledge, I began developing a strategy that would protect my interests, while ensuring that both Marcus and Jessica would face consequences for their deception. My attorney, Patricia Williams, was a specialist in high-asset divorces who had built a reputation for protecting women whose husbands had attempted to hide or dissipate marital resources. Her initial assessment of my case was optimistic, particularly given the evidence of Marcus's financial misconduct and the documentation of his adultery. Patricia explained that Oregon's divorce laws would allow me to claim not only my equitable share of our marital property, but also compensation for the resources Marcus had diverted to support his affair. The personal loan he had secured would be considered a debt that he alone would be responsible for repaying, while the improvements made to our house would increase its value and therefore my share of the equity. More importantly, the deed situation provided me with leverage that Marcus had apparently forgotten about or chosen to ignore. While we were both listed as owners, my name appeared first on all documents, and my significantly larger financial contribution to the original purchase gave me legal standing to claim majority ownership. Patricia was confident that a court would award me at least 70% of the house's current value, which had appreciated substantially since our purchase. The strategic planning phase involved more than just legal maneuvering. I needed to prepare for the practical aspects of dissolving our shared life, while ensuring that Marcus and Jessica's comfortable arrangement would be disrupted at the most inconvenient possible moment for them. Patricia advised me to begin documenting all of our shared assets, from bank accounts to retirement savings, ensuring that Marcus wouldn't be able to hide or transfer resources before our divorce was finalized. I opened individual bank accounts and began redirecting my salary deposits, establishing financial independence that would allow me to maintain my lifestyle during the divorce proceedings. This process revealed how completely I had allowed my financial identity to become merged with Marcus's over the years of our marriage. Separating our resources was more complex than I had anticipated, but it was also liberating to remember my own earning power and professional capabilities. The house itself became a strategic asset rather than just an emotional battleground. I began researching current market values in our neighborhood, gathering information about recent sales and property assessments that would support my claim for maximum compensation. The improvements Marcus had made using the fraudulent loan had actually increased the property's value significantly, meaning that his deception would ultimately benefit me financially while costing him both money and his marriage. I also started preparing for the logistical challenges of Marcus and Jessica's eventual eviction from the property. Since my name was on the deed and I had evidence of Marcus's financial misconduct, I would be able to reclaim full control of the house relatively quickly once divorce proceedings began. This meant that their comfortable domestic arrangement would end abruptly, forcing them to find alternative housing at a time when their relationship was likely to be under maximum stress. The psychological preparation was as important as the legal and financial planning. I had to steel myself for the confrontation that would inevitably come when Marcus discovered that his carefully laid plans were about to be destroyed by his own assumptions and oversights. The man who had taken my trust and our marriage for granted was about to learn that the quiet wife he had underestimated possessed both the intelligence and the determination to outmaneuver him completely. Patricia recommended that I maintain normal appearances for as long as possible, allowing Marcus and Jessica to become even more comfortable in their deception while I finalized my preparations. This advice was psychologically challenging but strategically sound. The longer they believed their arrangement was secure, the more devastating the eventual revelation would be. The waiting period also gave me time to plan for my future beyond the divorce. I began researching job opportunities in other cities, considering whether I wanted to remain in Portland after the dissolution of my marriage or start fresh somewhere else. My architectural skills were in demand nationally, and the prospect of beginning a new chapter in a different environment was becoming increasingly appealing. I explored the possibility of starting my own architectural consulting firm, using the resources I would gain from the divorce settlement to establish independence from the corporate environment where I had spent my entire career. The betrayal that had initially seemed like the end of my stability was beginning to look like an opportunity for the kind of professional autonomy I had always wanted but never had the financial security to pursue. The investigation phase concluded with a comprehensive dossier that documented every aspect of Marcus's deception and provided multiple legal strategies for protecting my interests. Rachel's final report included photographs, financial records, timeline analysis, and witness statements that would make Marcus's adultery undeniable in court, while also establishing his pattern of financial misconduct. More satisfying was the knowledge that Marcus and Jessica remained completely unaware of the storm that was gathering around them. Their confidence in their own cleverness had blinded them to the vulnerabilities they had created through their carelessness and assumption that I would remain passive in the face of betrayal. They were about to discover that the woman they had dismissed as an obstacle was actually a formidable opponent who had been preparing for battle while they enjoyed their stolen moments together. 3 months into my secret investigation, an unexpected opportunity presented itself that would accelerate my timeline considerably. Marcus announced over dinner that he had been invited to present at a major engineering conference in Seattle, a 3-day event that would showcase his firm's innovative approaches to sustainable infrastructure design. What he didn't mention, but what I discovered through my monitoring of his communications, was that Jessica would be accompanying him on this trip, ostensibly to photograph the conference for his marketing materials, but actually to enjoy what amounted to a romantic getaway funded by our joint business account. The Seattle trip represented the perfect opportunity to implement the first phase of my plan. While Marcus and Jessica were celebrating their relationship in the Pacific Northwest, I would be taking concrete steps to reclaim control of my property and my future. Patricia had prepared all the necessary legal documents, and we had been waiting for the ideal moment to serve them when Marcus would be too distracted to mount an immediate defense. I volunteered to drive Marcus to the airport, playing the role of the supportive wife who was proud of his professional achievements and understanding about the demands of his career. His gratitude for my flexibility and encouragement felt particularly hollow, given what I knew about his true reasons for traveling, but I maintained my performance flawlessly. Jessica met them at the departure gate, having arrived separately to maintain the fiction that her presence was purely professional. Watching them greet each other in the airport terminal, I felt a complex mixture of pain and anticipation. The casual intimacy of their interaction, the way Jessica adjusted Marcus's tie and he carried her camera equipment, painted a picture of domestic partnership that should have belonged to me. But instead of devastation, I felt the cold satisfaction of knowing that their comfortable arrangement was about to be permanently disrupted. The first 24 hours after their departure were devoted to executing what Patricia had dubbed Operation Clean Slate. A team of locksmiths arrived at dawn to change every lock on the property, from the main entrances to the garage doors and even the mailbox. I had legal authority to make these changes since my name was the primary one on the deed, and the evidence of Marcus's adultery provided justification for protecting the property from unauthorized access. The locksmith work was followed by a detailed inventory of the house's contents, conducted by a professional appraiser who would document everything from furniture and electronics to artwork and personal possessions. This inventory would be crucial for divorce proceedings, ensuring that nothing could be removed or hidden once Marcus returned and discovered that his living situation had changed dramatically. I spent the afternoon going through Jessica's belongings, which she had scattered throughout the house with the confidence of someone who believed her presence was permanent and welcome. Her clothes hung in my closet, her toiletries filled my bathroom drawers, and her art supplies had taken over the guest room that Marcus had renovated specifically for her use. Every item I encountered felt like a small violation, a reminder of how thoroughly they had colonized my personal space. The decision about what to do with Jessica's possessions required careful consideration. Simply throwing everything away would have been emotionally satisfying but legally problematic, potentially giving Marcus grounds to claim I had acted vindictively or destructively. Instead, I had everything carefully packed and stored in the garage, maintaining its condition while making it clear that Jessica's residency was permanently terminated. More strategic was my handling of the renovations Marcus had made to accommodate Jessica's presence. The converted guest room with its specialized lighting and work surfaces, the upgraded bathroom with luxury fixtures, and the home office expansion were all improvements that had increased the property's value. Rather than undoing these changes, I decided to present them to potential buyers as evidence of the house's versatility and modern functionality. The evening brought a different kind of satisfaction as I walked through my reclaimed home, seeing familiar spaces restored to their original purposes without the intrusion of another woman's belongings. The master bedroom felt like mine again without Jessica's jewelry scattered across my dresser. The kitchen returned to its role as my private domain, rather than a space where an interloper prepared meals for my husband. Even the pool area, where I had first discovered their relationship, felt cleansed of their presence. Marcus's attempts to contact me from Seattle were frequent and increasingly concerned. His initial calls were casual check-ins, asking about my day and whether anything interesting was happening at home. When I didn't answer immediately, his messages became more insistent, expressing worry about my safety and requesting that I call him back as soon as possible. The irony of his sudden attentiveness wasn't lost on me. The husband, who had been emotionally absent for months, was now desperate for reassurance that his domestic arrangements remained stable. I responded to his messages with carefully crafted texts that suggested everything was normal while avoiding any direct lies that could be used against me later. When he asked how I was spending my time alone, I mentioned working on some home improvement projects and catching up on personal tasks I had been neglecting. When he expressed concern about my delayed responses, I explained that I had been busy with work deadlines and hadn't been checking my phone regularly. The second day of their absence brought unexpected intelligence about their trip activities through Jessica's social media presence. Despite Marcus's insistence that this was a professional conference, her Instagram posts painted a clear picture of a romantic vacation. Photos of expensive dinners, couples spa treatments, and intimate moments on Seattle's waterfront revealed the true nature of their relationship while providing additional evidence for divorce proceedings. More useful was Jessica's tendency to geotag her locations and timestamp her activities, creating a detailed record of how they were spending their time and resources. The restaurants they visited were far beyond what a legitimate business trip would justify, and their accommodation was a luxury hotel suite, rather than the standard business lodging Marcus typically chose for professional travel. Every post strengthened my case while demonstrating their complete lack of awareness about the consequences of their actions. I used their absence to meet with Patricia and finalize the timing of our legal offensive. The divorce papers were ready to be filed, with accompanying motions for temporary exclusive possession of the marital home and immediate freezing of all joint financial accounts. The evidence we had gathered supported requests for alimony, attorney's fees, and a disproportionate share of marital assets based on Marcus's misconduct and financial deception. Patricia's strategy was to file all documents simultaneously on the morning of Marcus's return, creating maximum impact and preventing him from taking defensive measures. The personal loan he had secured using our house as collateral would be challenged as fraudulent, potentially making him liable for immediate repayment while strengthening my claim to the property. The timing would ensure that he would arrive home to locked doors and legal papers, making his betrayal's consequences immediately and dramatically apparent. The third day brought final preparations for Marcus's return, and the beginning of what would undoubtedly be the most difficult period of the entire process. I arranged to stay with my sister Claire in Lake Oswego, giving myself emotional support and physical distance, while the initial shock of Marcus's new reality played out. Claire had been aware of my marital problems for months and was eager to provide whatever assistance I needed during this transition. Claire's home provided a safe space to monitor the situation, while avoiding direct confrontation during Marcus's most volatile period. Her husband Robert was an attorney specializing in business law, and while he couldn't represent me directly due to conflict of interest rules, his insights about litigation strategy and negotiation tactics had been invaluable during my preparation phase. The house itself stood ready for Marcus's return like a stage set for the final act of our marriage. Every room had been restored to its pre-Jessica state, creating an environment that would immediately communicate the changed circumstances while avoiding any obvious vindictiveness that could be used against me in court. The new locks would prevent entry, forcing Marcus to confront the reality of his situation before he could even access his belongings. I had arranged for a process server to wait near the house, ready to deliver the divorce papers and related motions as soon as Marcus appeared. This timing would ensure he received official notification of the legal proceedings before he could contact an attorney or begin moving assets. The element of surprise was crucial for maintaining my strategic advantage during the opening phases of what would likely be contentious negotiations. The psychological preparation for this confrontation required acknowledging that the man I had married was about to become my adversary in a legal battle that would determine both our futures. 12 years of shared history, mutual support, and intimate partnership were being reduced to financial calculations and legal strategies. The emotional weight of this transition was enormous, but my anger about his betrayal provided the motivation needed to see the process through to completion. Marcus's flight was scheduled to arrive at Portland International at 4:30 p.m., giving him and Jessica enough time to retrieve their luggage and drive home before sunset. I imagined their conversation during the drive, probably filled with plans for the evening and excitement about their successful weekend getaway. Neither of them had any idea that their comfortable domestic arrangement was about to be permanently and irrevocably shattered. The final hours before Marcus's return felt like the calm before a storm that I had been planning and anticipating for months. Every element of my strategy was in place, from the legal documents to the changed locks to the evidence that would support my claims in court. The woman who had discovered her husband's betrayal by accident had evolved into someone who could orchestrate a systematic response that would protect her interests while ensuring that both Marcus and Jessica faced consequences for their deception. As evening approached, I positioned myself at Claire's house with a clear view of the street, ready to receive the phone calls that would confirm Marcus had discovered his new reality. The man who had taken my trust and our marriage for granted was about to learn that the quiet wife he had dismissed possessed both the intelligence and the determination to outmaneuver him completely. The game was about to begin, and I held all the winning cards. The phone call came at 6:47 p.m., exactly 17 minutes after Marcus's BMW had turned into our driveway, according to the security camera footage Claire was monitoring on her laptop. His voice carried a mixture of confusion and rising panic that would have been satisfying if it weren't so pathetic. He was standing outside what used to be our front door, unable to enter the house he had assumed would always be available to him, demanding to know why his key no longer worked and whether I was inside, refusing to answer. I let the call go to voicemail, following Patricia's advice to avoid any direct communication until Marcus had been properly served with the legal documents. The process server had confirmed delivery of the divorce papers, property motions, and asset freeze orders, meaning that Marcus now had official notification of the legal proceedings, even if he hadn't yet fully processed their implications. The second voicemail arrived 3 minutes later, his tone shifting from confusion to anger as he realized that the changed locks were intentional rather than accidental. Jessica's reaction was captured in a series of increasingly frantic Instagram stories that documented their evolving understanding of the situation. Her first post showed the locked front door with a caption about, quote, "unexpected surprises," and laughing emojis, suggesting she initially assumed this was some kind of misunderstanding or practical joke. The second post, uploaded 15 minutes later, showed Marcus on his phone with a much more serious expression, accompanied by text about dealing with some complications and asking her followers to send positive energy. Claire provided real-time updates from her monitoring position, describing Marcus's increasingly agitated behavior as he walked around the house trying different entrances and peering through windows. He had apparently called a locksmith, only to be told that they couldn't override the new locks without proof of ownership and proper identification. When Marcus couldn't provide documentation showing his exclusive right to access the property, the locksmith had refused service and suggested he contact a lawyer instead. The third voicemail Marcus left revealed that he had finally read through the legal documents the process server had delivered. His voice shook with genuine shock as he demanded to know when I had filed for divorce and why he hadn't received any advance warning about my intentions. The entitlement in his tone was remarkable. The man who had been secretly planning to install his mistress in our home was outraged that I had taken legal action without consulting him first. Jessica's social media presence became increasingly erratic as their evening plans disintegrated. A story posted from the parking lot of a nearby hotel showed her looking genuinely distressed, with a caption about unexpected challenges and trusting the universe to provide solutions. The spiritual teacher who had seemed so confident while enjoying the benefits of my home was proving much less enlightened when faced with actual adversity. Marcus's fourth call came at 8:23 p.m., this time from Jessica's phone, when I continued to ignore his number. His strategy had shifted from demanding explanations to attempting negotiation, offering to work things out, and asking what I wanted him to do to fix this situation. The assumption that our marriage's dissolution was something that could be resolved through compromise rather than the inevitable consequence of his choices revealed how completely he misunderstood both my position and my determination. The hotel they eventually chose was a mid-range business establishment near the airport, a dramatic downgrade from the luxury accommodations they had enjoyed in Seattle. Jessica's final Instagram post of the evening showed their cramped room with forced positivity about adventures in unexpected places. But her followers' comments revealed growing awareness that something significant had gone wrong in her seemingly perfect life. Claire's husband Robert provided valuable insight into the legal implications of Marcus's situation as we reviewed the day's events over dinner. The divorce papers had been filed in Multnomah County Court, with requests for immediate temporary orders that would give me exclusive possession of the marital home while asset division was being determined. Marcus would have 10 days to respond to the filing, but the temporary orders were likely to be granted based on the evidence of his adultery and financial misconduct. More importantly, the asset freeze order would prevent Marcus from accessing our joint accounts or taking on additional debt using marital property as collateral. This meant that his ability to finance temporary housing for himself and Jessica was severely limited, forcing them to rely on his personal accounts and credit cards rather than the shared resources he had been using to support their relationship. The fraudulent loan Marcus had secured would become a central issue in the divorce proceedings. Since he had used our house as collateral without my knowledge or consent, Patricia was confident that the court would hold him solely responsible for repayment, while allowing me to claim the full value of the property improvements the loan had funded. His attempt to prepare our home for his mistress would ultimately strengthen my financial position while weakening his own. Robert explained that Marcus's best legal strategy would be to claim the loan was for legitimate home improvements that benefited our marriage, but the timing and nature of the renovations made this argument difficult to support. The guest suite conversion and office expansion had been completed during the period when his relationship with Jessica was intensifying, and their correspondence about her moving in provided clear evidence of his actual motivations. The second day brought attempts by Marcus to establish contact through intermediaries, revealing his growing desperation as the reality of his situation became clearer. His business partner, Kenneth, called Claire's house asking if I was available to discuss a misunderstanding that was affecting Marcus's ability to focus on work. When Claire politely explained that I was unavailable and suggested Kenneth direct Marcus to communicate through attorneys, the conversation revealed that Marcus hadn't even told his closest professional associate about the divorce filing. Marcus's mother, Eleanor, made a more direct approach, appearing at Claire's front door with homemade cookies and a carefully rehearsed speech about the importance of family forgiveness and working through marital difficulties. Eleanor had always been critical of what she perceived as my career focus and independent nature, and her assumption that I could be guilted into reconciliation revealed her fundamental misunderstanding of both the situation and my character. Claire handled Eleanor's visit with diplomatic firmness, accepting the cookies graciously, while explaining that the divorce proceedings were already underway and that any communication needed to go through legal channels. Eleanor's shocked reaction suggested that Marcus had not fully informed his family about the circumstances leading to our separation, probably hoping to control the narrative and minimize his responsibility for the marriage's collapse. The private investigator Rachel provided updates on Marcus and Jessica's temporary living situation that revealed growing tension in their relationship. Hotel surveillance cameras had captured several heated conversations between them in the parking lot, with body language suggesting disagreement about their next steps. Jessica's financial contribution to their crisis was apparently minimal, leaving Marcus to bear the full cost of their displacement while also dealing with frozen access to our joint resources. More telling was Rachel's observation that Jessica had begun reaching out to other men in her social circle, apparently exploring backup options for housing and financial support. Her text messages, which Rachel was monitoring through legal channels established during the investigation, showed conversations with former boyfriends and male friends about temporary arrangements and, quote, challenging transitions that suggested she was already preparing to abandon Marcus if their situation didn't improve quickly. This intelligence revealed that Jessica's commitment to Marcus was primarily transactional, based on the lifestyle and security he could provide rather than genuine emotional attachment. The woman who had seemed so devoted while enjoying the benefits of our home was proving to be far less loyal when faced with the inconvenience and uncertainty of their current circumstances. Marcus's attempts to secure temporary housing were complicated by his damaged credit situation and the asset freeze that prevented him from accessing funds for deposits and first month's rent. The fraudulent loan he had taken was already affecting his debt-to-income ratio, making him a less attractive tenant for quality rental properties. Most landlords in Portland's competitive rental market required proof of stable income and liquid assets that Marcus couldn't currently provide. The legal maneuvering accelerated as Marcus finally secured representation from a divorce attorney named Bradley Hoffman, who specialized in defending men accused of marital misconduct. Hoffman's initial filings challenged the temporary orders and requested immediate access to the marital home, but Patricia was prepared for this strategy and had documentation ready to counter every argument. Hoffman's first motion claimed that the changed locks constituted an illegal eviction and that Marcus had been denied due process in the temporary order proceedings. Patricia's response included photographs from Rachel's surveillance showing Jessica using her own key to enter the house, proving that Marcus had given unauthorized access to a third party and justifying the security measures I had taken. The motion also attempted to characterize the guest suite renovations as legitimate home improvements that enhanced the property's value for both spouses. Patricia countered with Marcus's text messages to Jessica about converting the space specifically for her use, along with timeline evidence showing that the work had been completed to facilitate her residency rather than to benefit our marriage. Most damaging to Marcus's position was Hoffman's request for immediate access to our joint financial accounts, which Patricia opposed with evidence of how Marcus had been using marital resources to fund his extramarital relationship. The credit card statements showing expensive dinners and weekend trips for two people during periods when Marcus claimed to be traveling alone for business made his financial misconduct undeniable. The court's response to these competing motions would determine the immediate future for all three of us. If the temporary orders were upheld, Marcus and Jessica would remain displaced, while I maintained control of our home and shared resources. If Hoffman succeeded in overturning the orders, Marcus might regain access to the house and our joint accounts, potentially allowing him to continue funding his relationship with Jessica using marital assets. Patricia was confident that our evidence was strong enough to support the temporary orders, but she warned that Hoffman was skilled at creating delays and complications that could extend the proceedings for months. The longer the case took to resolve, the more expensive it would become for both sides, potentially reducing the resources available for final settlement. The psychological toll of this legal warfare was enormous, requiring me to maintain focus on strategic considerations while processing the emotional reality that my 12-year marriage was being dissected in court documents and legal arguments. Every filing and motion reduced our shared history to financial calculations and behavioral evidence, transforming intimate memories into weapons in an adversarial proceeding. But the alternative to fighting was accepting Marcus's betrayal and allowing him to benefit from his deception while I suffered the consequences of his choices. The temporary displacement and legal expenses were prices worth paying to ensure that neither Marcus nor Jessica would ultimately profit from their systematic violation of our marriage and our home. The Multnomah County Courthouse at 8:30 a.m. on a foggy Thursday morning became the arena where the fate of my marriage would be decided through legal arguments rather than emotional appeals. I arrived with Patricia 30 minutes early, dressed in a conservative navy suit that projected competence and respectability while avoiding any appearance of vindictiveness or dramatics. The temporary orders hearing would determine whether Marcus regained access to our home and joint accounts, or whether my strategic advantage would be maintained during the divorce proceedings. Marcus appeared in the hallway outside Judge Rebecca Martinez's courtroom looking haggard and poorly prepared, his usually immaculate appearance showing signs of the stress he had been under since discovering his changed circumstances. His attorney Bradley Hoffman carried a thick briefcase and wore the confident expression of someone who specialized in creating reasonable doubt about his client's behavior. But the evidence Patricia had assembled would make his job considerably more difficult than he probably anticipated. Jessica's absence from the courthouse was telling, suggesting that she had either been advised to avoid public association with the proceedings or had chosen to distance herself from Marcus as his legal troubles intensified. Her recent social media activity had shifted from supportive partnership to vague posts about personal growth and new directions that indicated she was already preparing her followers for a narrative that didn't include Marcus as a central figure. Judge Martinez called our case promptly at 9 o'clock, her no-nonsense demeanor immediately establishing that she expected efficient presentation of facts rather than emotional theater from either side. Her reputation for protecting the interests of wronged spouses while maintaining strict adherence to legal procedure made her an ideal arbiter for our particular situation, and Patricia had specifically requested assignment to her courtroom. Hoffman opened with a motion to dissolve the temporary orders, arguing that Marcus had been denied due process and illegally excluded from property he legally owned. His presentation emphasized Marcus's shock at discovering the changed locks and his inability to access personal belongings and business documents stored in the house. The argument was carefully crafted to portray Marcus as the victim of my vindictive overreaction rather than the perpetrator of marital misconduct. Hoffman's strategy became clearer as he presented Marcus's version of events, characterizing his relationship with Jessica as a friendship that had provided emotional support during a difficult period in our marriage. According to this narrative, Marcus had been struggling with depression and professional stress, and Jessica had offered counseling and wellness coaching that had helped him navigate these challenges. The guest suite renovations were described as home improvements intended to create a retreat space for both of us, rather than accommodations for his mistress. Patricia's response systematically demolished each element of Hoffman's argument with documented evidence that made Marcus's deception undeniable. The surveillance photographs showing Marcus and Jessica in clearly romantic situations contradicted any claim of platonic friendship. The timeline of their relationship, established through phone records and credit card statements, proved that Marcus had been systematically deceiving me for months, rather than seeking help for legitimate personal struggles. Most damaging was Patricia's presentation of the financial evidence, including the fraudulent loan documents and credit card statements showing expensive dinners and romantic getaways charged to our joint accounts. Judge Martinez's expression grew increasingly stern as Patricia detailed how Marcus had used marital resources to fund an extramarital relationship while lying to his wife about his activities and intentions. The guest suite renovation evidence was particularly compelling, with Patricia presenting Marcus's own text messages to Jessica about preparing the space specifically for her residency. His communications revealed detailed planning for her move-in, including discussions about storage solutions for her belongings and workspace requirements for her graphic design business. These messages made any claim about general home improvement obviously false. Hoffman attempted to recover by challenging the admissibility of some evidence and questioning the methods Rachel had used to gather information about Marcus's activities. His objections were technically proficient, but ultimately unsuccessful, as Patricia had been careful to ensure that all surveillance and documentation had been obtained through legal channels, with proper authorization. Judge Martinez's questioning of Marcus directly revealed additional problems with his position. When asked to explain the timeline of renovations and his communications with Jessica, Marcus became evasive and contradictory, unable to maintain the fiction that their relationship was innocent, while also explaining why he had given her a key to our house and discussed her permanent residency. The most uncomfortable moment came when Judge Martinez asked Marcus to explain how he had justified using marital assets to fund romantic activities with another woman. His response, that he had considered the expenses to be personal stress relief rather than support for an affair, demonstrated either remarkable self-deception or calculated dishonesty that the judge clearly found unconvincing. Patricia's presentation of Jessica's social media evidence provided additional context that strengthened our case. The Instagram posts showing expensive dinners and luxury accommodations during Marcus's supposed business trips proved that he had been systematically lying about his activities while using our shared resources to fund his relationship. Judge Martinez examined several of these posts personally, noting the timestamps and locations that contradicted Marcus's stated travel schedule. The court's decision was swift and decisive. Judge Martinez upheld all temporary orders, finding that Marcus had violated his marital obligations through adultery and financial misconduct that justified his temporary exclusion from the marital home. She specifically noted that his decision to give Jessica access to the property without my consent constituted a breach of trust that made the changed locks a reasonable security measure rather than vindictive action. More importantly, the asset freeze would remain in place until final divorce proceedings, preventing Marcus from accessing joint accounts or taking on additional debt using marital property as collateral. This decision effectively maintained my financial security while limiting Marcus's ability to continue funding his relationship with Jessica through our shared resources. Hoffman's request for immediate access to personal belongings was granted with strict limitations. Marcus would be allowed one supervised visit to collect essential items like clothing and business documents, but he would be prohibited from removing anything that could be considered marital property pending final asset division. This compromise ensured that he could maintain his professional obligations, while preventing him from taking valuable items that might be difficult to recover later. The financial implications of the court's decision became apparent immediately after the hearing. Marcus approached Patricia in the courthouse hallway, requesting a private conference to discuss possible settlement negotiations. His eagerness to avoid prolonged litigation suggested that he was beginning to understand the weakness of his position and the potential cost of fighting a case where his misconduct was so thoroughly documented. Patricia's response was diplomatically non-committal, explaining that any settlement discussions would need to wait until Marcus had secured stable housing and could demonstrate his ability to meet his financial obligations. The not-so-subtle implication was that his current displacement and limited access to funds had weakened his negotiating position considerably, making premature settlement talks disadvantageous for my interests. The immediate aftermath of the hearing brought intelligence from Rachel about the deteriorating situation between Marcus and Jessica. Hotel records showed that they had been forced to move to progressively cheaper accommodations as Marcus's available credit reached its limits. Their arguments in the hotel parking lots had become more frequent and more heated, with Jessica apparently expressing frustration about their living conditions and uncertain future prospects. More significantly, Rachel's surveillance revealed that Jessica had begun meeting privately with other men, including her former boyfriend Tyler Chen, a successful tech entrepreneur who owned a luxury condo in the Pearl District. These meetings suggested that Jessica was actively exploring alternative arrangements rather than supporting Marcus through his legal and financial difficulties. The private investigator's psychological profile of Jessica proved increasingly accurate as pressure mounted on her comfortable lifestyle. Her social media presence shifted from documenting her relationship with Marcus to promoting her individual brand as a wellness coach and lifestyle consultant. The posts that had once featured Marcus prominently were replaced by solo content that emphasized her independence and personal growth journey. Marcus's attempts to maintain the relationship while dealing with his legal crisis revealed his emotional dependence on Jessica in ways that she appeared unwilling to reciprocate. His frequent calls and text messages, documented through Rachel's monitoring, showed increasing desperation as he sought reassurance about their future together, while Jessica's responses became more distant and non-committal. The financial pressure on Marcus intensified as the temporary orders prevented him from accessing the resources he needed to maintain the lifestyle that had attracted Jessica initially. His business was suffering as the stress of divorce proceedings affected his ability to focus on client relationships and project management. Several potential contracts had been lost due to his distracted performance and unreliable availability during this crisis period. Kenneth, Marcus's business partner, reached out to Patricia directly with concerns about the firm's stability and Marcus's ability to meet his professional obligations. This communication revealed that Marcus hadn't been entirely honest with his business associates about the extent of his personal problems, and Kenneth was beginning to consider protective measures for their shared practice. The revelation that Marcus's professional reputation was being damaged by his personal choices added another layer of consequence to his decisions. His engineering consulting firm depended on trust and reliability, qualities that were being undermined by his inability to maintain consistent availability and his apparent dishonesty about his personal situation. Jessica's accelerating departure from Marcus's life became obvious when she failed to attend a client dinner that he had specifically requested her help with, claiming a last-minute yoga teaching obligation that Rachel's surveillance proved was actually a dinner date with Tyler Chen. Marcus's realization that Jessica was actively pursuing other options while he struggled with the consequences of their relationship created additional stress that affected his already deteriorating emotional state. The cascade of consequences that had begun with the changed locks was accelerating beyond Marcus's ability to control or manage. His assumption that Jessica would support him through this difficult period was proving as false as his belief that I would passively accept his betrayal. The woman he had chosen over his wife was abandoning him exactly when he needed her most, while the wife he had dismissed was systematically dismantling the comfortable life he had taken for granted. The temporary orders hearing had established the legal framework that would govern our divorce proceedings, but more importantly, it had demonstrated to all parties that Marcus's strategic position was fundamentally weak. His attempts to maintain control over both his relationship with Jessica and his access to marital resources had failed completely, leaving him isolated and financially constrained, while I maintained the upper hand in all subsequent negotiations. The stage was now set for the final phase of our divorce proceedings, where Marcus would be forced to choose between accepting a settlement that reflected his misconduct or fighting a prolonged legal battle that he was almost certain to lose. Either way, the comfortable arrangement he had enjoyed at my expense was permanently over, and both he and Jessica were beginning to understand the true cost of their deception. The week following the temporary orders hearing brought a series of revelations that accelerated the complete dissolution of Marcus's carefully constructed deceptions. Jessica's final Instagram post featuring Marcus was a carefully staged photograph from 3 weeks earlier, uploaded with a caption about cherishing meaningful connections that served as her public goodbye to their relationship. Within hours, her social media transformed into a rebranding campaign for her solo wellness coaching business, complete with a new logo and promotional materials that had clearly been prepared well in advance. Rachel's surveillance confirmed what the social media evidence suggested. Jessica had officially moved into Tyler Chen's Pearl District condominium, bringing with her the expensive exercise equipment and designer furnishings that Marcus had purchased for their shared future. Tyler's financial resources made him a more attractive partner than Marcus, whose legal troubles and asset freeze had eliminated his ability to provide the lifestyle Jessica required to maintain her carefully curated online presence. The speed and completeness of Jessica's departure left Marcus genuinely devastated in ways that revealed how emotionally invested he had become in their relationship. His attempts to contact her were ignored, his visits to her new residence were refused, and her attorney sent a cease and desist letter demanding that he stop all communication attempts. The woman who had seemed so committed to their partnership had discarded him as efficiently as she had originally targeted him for his resources. Marcus's emotional breakdown manifested in increasingly erratic behavior that affected every aspect of his remaining life. His business meetings became unreliable as he struggled to focus on technical discussions while processing the collapse of his personal situation. Kenneth finally confronted him about the impact his personal problems were having on their shared practice, threatening to dissolve their partnership unless Marcus could guarantee his professional reliability. The engineering firm that Marcus had spent years building was suffering from his inability to maintain client relationships during this crisis period. 2 major contracts were terminated when Marcus failed to deliver promised project timelines, and several potential clients chose competitors after experiencing his distracted and unprofessional demeanor during initial consultations. His reputation in Portland's engineering community was being damaged by his personal chaos in ways that would have long-term professional consequences. Meanwhile, my own situation was improving dramatically as the legal proceedings continued to favor my strategic position. The house felt like my own space again, without the intrusion of Marcus's belongings or the violation of Jessica's presence. I had begun redecorating according to my own preferences rather than the compromises required by marriage, creating an environment that reflected my individual taste and priorities for the first time in over a decade. More importantly, the financial security provided by the asset freeze and temporary orders allowed me to explore professional opportunities that would have been impossible while managing the emotional stress of Marcus's deception. A former colleague named Diana Walsh reached out about a senior architect position with a prestigious firm in San Francisco, offering both a substantial salary increase and the chance to work on cutting-edge sustainable design projects that aligned with my professional interests. The San Francisco opportunity represented more than just career advancement. It was a chance to start completely fresh in a city where no one knew about my failed marriage or the circumstances of my divorce. Diana's firm specialized in innovative residential and commercial projects that would challenge my skills while providing the kind of creative fulfillment that had been missing from my work in Portland during the final years of my marriage. The interview process for the San Francisco position revealed how much my confidence had grown during the months of strategic planning and legal maneuvering. Where I had once been tentative about promoting my capabilities and negotiating for better conditions, I now approached professional discussions with clear knowledge of my worth and specific expectations about compensation and working conditions. The transformation from accommodating wife to assertive professional was complete and empowering. Patricia's negotiations with Bradley Hoffman revealed that Marcus was finally beginning to understand the futility of fighting our divorce settlement. His legal bills were mounting while his income declined due to his deteriorating business situation, creating financial pressure that made prolonged litigation increasingly impossible. Hoffman's latest settlement proposal included Marcus's acceptance of responsibility for the fraudulent loan and agreement to a property division that heavily favored my interests. The proposed settlement would give me approximately 75% of our home's equity, along with the majority of our retirement savings and investment accounts. Marcus would retain his business assets and assume full responsibility for all debts he had incurred during our separation, including the $30,000 loan he had used to prepare our home for Jessica's residency. The terms reflected his weakened negotiating position and the strength of evidence supporting my claims. More satisfying was the requirement that Marcus would be prohibited from claiming any portion of my future earnings or professional achievements, ensuring that my new career opportunities wouldn't be diminished by ongoing financial obligations to him. The settlement would provide complete financial independence, while giving me the resources to pursue opportunities like the San Francisco position, without concerns about supporting my former husband's lifestyle. The psychological evaluation that the court had ordered for Marcus revealed additional problems that strengthened my position in the final negotiations. Dr. Amanda Foster, a forensic psychologist specializing in personality disorders, identified patterns of narcissistic behavior and emotional manipulation that explained many of the dynamics I had experienced during our marriage. Her report documented Marcus's inability to accept responsibility for his actions and his tendency to blame others for consequences resulting from his own choices. Dr. Foster's analysis also revealed that Marcus's relationship with Jessica had been primarily transactional rather than emotional, based on his need for validation and status rather than genuine connection. This finding supported my contention that his affair had been a calculated betrayal, rather than an impulsive mistake driven by marital problems. The distinction was important for establishing the level of misconduct that justified the punitive aspects of our settlement agreement. The private investigator's final report provided a comprehensive timeline of Marcus's deception that would serve as permanent documentation of his betrayal. Rachel's investigation had uncovered evidence of at least 3 other women Marcus had pursued during our marriage, suggesting that Jessica was part of a pattern of infidelity rather than an isolated incident. This information wasn't necessary for our divorce proceedings, but provided personal closure about the true nature of our relationship. Kenneth's decision to dissolve his business partnership with Marcus created additional financial pressure that accelerated the settlement negotiations. The engineering firm's client base was being split between the two partners, with Kenneth retaining the more valuable contracts due to his maintained professional reputation. Marcus would be left with a significantly diminished practice that would struggle to generate the income necessary to support his obligations and lifestyle. The timing of Kenneth's announcement coincided with Marcus's landlord's demand for additional security deposits due to his deteriorating credit rating and unstable income situation. His temporary housing arrangement was becoming unsustainable, just as his ability to secure alternative accommodations was being undermined by his financial difficulties. The cascade of consequences from his original deception was accelerating beyond his ability to control or manage. Jessica's new relationship with Tyler Chen provided a bitter lesson about the nature of her original interest in Marcus. Tyler's social media presence showcased expensive vacations and luxury purchases that far exceeded what Marcus had been able to provide, revealing that Jessica's approach to relationships was consistently based on financial opportunity rather than emotional connection. The speed with which she had transferred her affections confirmed that Marcus had been used rather than loved. The final settlement conference was scheduled for a Wednesday morning in Patricia's office, with all parties agreeing to mediation rather than continued litigation. Marcus's acceptance of mediation represented his acknowledgement that fighting our divorce would only increase his costs while delaying his ability to begin rebuilding his professional and personal life. The terms we had negotiated gave him enough resources to restart while ensuring that I received fair compensation for his betrayal. Diana Walsh confirmed my acceptance of the San Francisco position during a phone call that felt like the final step in my transformation from betrayed wife to independent professional. The salary and benefits package exceeded my expectations, and the firm's commitment to innovative design work represented the kind of career opportunity I had dreamed about but never pursued while managing the compromises required by marriage. The moving timeline for the San Francisco position aligned perfectly with the expected completion of our divorce proceedings. I would be able to finalize the sale of our Portland house, complete the legal dissolution of our marriage, and begin my new career as a completely independent woman. The geographic distance would ensure that I never had to encounter Marcus or be reminded of the years I had wasted trusting someone who was systematically deceiving me. Patricia's final review of our settlement terms confirmed that every element of my strategic planning had succeeded beyond our original expectations. The financial resources I would receive would provide security for years while funding my relocation and career transition. Marcus's acceptance of responsibility for his misconduct was documented in legal terms that would prevent him from revising history or claiming victimhood in future relationships. The house that had once represented our shared dreams would be sold to fund my individual future, with the proceeds providing the foundation for a life built on my own capabilities and judgment rather than the false promises of partnership. The mortgage payments Marcus had made during our separation had essentially funded my transition to independence, turning his betrayal into my opportunity for freedom and professional advancement. As the final settlement conference approached, I felt a mixture of anticipation and relief that this difficult chapter was finally concluding. The woman who had discovered her husband's affair in her own kitchen was about to emerge from divorce proceedings with greater financial security, professional opportunities, and personal confidence than she had possessed during the supposedly happy years of marriage. Marcus's betrayal had ultimately liberated me from a relationship that was limiting my potential and connected me to possibilities I would never have pursued while managing the emotional labor of an unequal partnership. The mediation conference room at Patricia's law firm felt like a stage set for the final act of a drama that had consumed nearly 8 months of my life. Marcus arrived looking defeated and significantly older than his 38 years, wearing an ill-fitting suit that suggested his wardrobe had been reduced to essentials during his period of displacement. His attorney, Bradley Hoffman, carried a single folder rather than his usual briefcase full of documents, indicating that their strategy had shifted from aggressive defense to damage control. The mediator, Janet Sullivan, was a retired family court judge, whose reputation for fairness and efficiency made her the ideal arbiter for our final negotiations. Her opening remarks emphasized the benefits of reaching agreement rather than proceeding to trial, but everyone in the room understood that Marcus's position was too weak to justify continued litigation. The evidence of his misconduct was overwhelming, his financial resources were depleted, and his professional reputation was continuing to deteriorate with each passing week. Patricia's presentation of our final settlement terms was comprehensive and unforgiving, reflecting the strength of our position and the documented extent of Marcus's betrayal. The property division would award me 80% of our home's equity, which recent appraisals valued at nearly $400,000 after accounting for the improvements Marcus had made to accommodate Jessica. His fraudulent loan would be his sole responsibility, along with all legal fees and court costs associated with our divorce proceedings. The retirement account division was equally favorable, with my receiving the majority of our accumulated savings based on Marcus's use of marital funds to support his extramarital relationship. The thousands of dollars he had spent on dinners, gifts, and travel with Jessica would be calculated as marital waste, reducing his share of our joint assets by an equivalent amount. Every romantic gesture he had made toward his mistress would ultimately benefit my financial security. Marcus's acceptance of these terms was delivered in a monotone voice that revealed his complete emotional exhaustion. The man who had once been confident enough to betray his wife and plan a future with another woman had been reduced to someone who simply wanted the legal proceedings to end, regardless of the financial cost. His acknowledgement of responsibility for the affair and the fraudulent loan was recorded by a court stenographer, creating permanent legal documentation of his misconduct. More satisfying was the non-disclosure agreement that Patricia had insisted upon, preventing Marcus from discussing our marriage or divorce in any public forum, including social media, professional networks, or future relationships. This clause would ensure that he couldn't revise history or present himself as the victim of vindictive ex-wife behavior when rebuilding his personal and professional life. The truth about his character would be preserved in legal documents, while his ability to manipulate narratives was permanently restricted. The alimony arrangements reflected Oregon's recognition that Marcus's affair had violated his marital obligations in ways that justified ongoing financial consequences. For 3 years, he would pay monthly support that would supplement my income during the transition to my new career in San Francisco. The payments would be automatically deducted from his business accounts, ensuring compliance while minimizing the need for future contact between us. Janet Sullivan's reading of the final agreement took nearly an hour, with each clause representing another aspect of the life Marcus and I had shared being reduced to legal language and financial calculations. The house where we had planned to grow old together would be sold within 60 days, with proceeds distributed according to our negotiated percentages. The retirement accounts we had built through years of shared sacrifice would be divided to reflect his betrayal's impact on our partnership. The signing ceremony was brief and businesslike, with Marcus adding his signature to documents that formally dissolved our 12-year marriage while acknowledging his responsibility for its failure. His hand shook slightly as he signed the property transfer documents, perhaps recognizing that he was giving up not just financial assets but the last connection to the stable life he had destroyed through his own choices. Bradley Hoffman's final consultation with Marcus revealed the full scope of his client's diminished circumstances. The engineering practice that Kenneth had dissolved was leaving Marcus with a handful of small clients and significant debt obligations. His temporary housing situation remained unstable, and his damaged credit rating was preventing him from securing a mortgage for his own property. The comfortable lifestyle he had shared with me was being replaced by financial struggle and professional uncertainty. Patricia's post-mediation briefing confirmed that every aspect of our strategic planning had succeeded beyond our original expectations. The financial settlement would provide immediate resources for my relocation to San Francisco, while establishing long-term security through the alimony payments and retirement account transfers. More importantly, the legal documentation of Marcus's misconduct would protect me from future claims or attempts to modify our agreement. The house sale process began immediately after the mediation, with Patricia recommending a real estate agent named Michael Torres, who specialized in high-value properties in Portland's West Hills. Michael's initial assessment confirmed that our home's value had continued to appreciate during the months of divorce proceedings, meaning that my share of the proceeds would exceed our mediation calculations by several $1,000s. The irony of selling the house that Marcus had renovated for Jessica's benefit wasn't lost on me as potential buyers toured the improved guest suite and expanded office space. The modifications he had made to accommodate his mistress were now features that increased the property's appeal to legitimate purchasers, ultimately benefiting my financial position while serving as a permanent reminder of his poor judgment and misplaced priorities. Michael's marketing strategy emphasized the house's potential as a multi-generational home or professional workspace, attracting buyers who appreciated the flexibility that Marcus's renovations had created. The first showing attracted multiple interested parties, suggesting that the sale would proceed quickly and potentially generate competing offers that would drive the final price above our asking amount. The weeks between mediation and closing became a period of systematic transition, as I prepared for my move to San Francisco while finalizing the dissolution of my Portland life. Diana Walsh coordinated my integration into the architectural firm's ongoing projects, sending design briefs and project specifications that allowed me to begin contributing to their work even before my official start date. The intellectual challenge of their innovative approach to sustainable design was exactly the professional stimulation I had been craving during the stagnant final years of my marriage. Packing our shared belongings required difficult decisions about what represented my individual identity versus what belonged to our defunct partnership. The artwork we had collected together, the furniture we had chosen as a couple, and the kitchen equipment we had accumulated through years of entertaining all needed to be evaluated for their emotional significance versus their practical value in my new life. I chose to take only items that reflected my personal taste and professional needs, leaving behind anything that carried strong associations with Marcus or our marriage. The dining room table where we had shared thousands of meals would remain for the new owners, along with the bedroom furniture where we had once been intimate, and the living room seating where we had planned our future together. Starting fresh meant abandoning the physical reminders of a relationship that had been built on false foundations. Claire's assistance during the packing process provided emotional support while helping me evaluate which belongings deserved space in my new life. Her perspective as someone who had witnessed both the happy years of my marriage and the devastating discovery of Marcus's betrayal helped me distinguish between items with genuine sentimental value and those that represented the illusion of partnership rather than authentic shared experiences. The financial arrangements for my San Francisco transition were seamless thanks to the resources provided by our divorce settlement. The signing bonus Diana's firm had offered, combined with my share of the house sale proceeds, allowed me to purchase a stunning condominium in Soma with panoramic bay views that would have been impossible to afford while supporting Marcus's lifestyle and managing our joint expenses. The San Francisco property market required quick decision-making and aggressive bidding strategies that were completely different from Portland's more relaxed approach to real estate transactions. My experience with the stress and complexity of divorce negotiations had prepared me for the competitive dynamics of luxury property acquisition, and I successfully secured a 2-bedroom unit in a converted warehouse that perfectly suited my aesthetic preferences and professional needs. The final house sale closing took place on a rainy Thursday morning that felt appropriately melancholy for the end of such a significant chapter in my life. Marcus appeared for the required signatures looking even more diminished than during our mediation, his portion of the proceeds barely sufficient to cover his outstanding debts and legal obligations. The contrast between his desperate financial situation and my comfortable transition to a new life illustrated the consequences of his choices in terms that couldn't be rationalized or minimized. Michael Torres's distribution of the sale proceeds confirmed that my strategic patience had been rewarded with financial results that exceeded our most optimistic projections. The final amount deposited into my individual account provided security for years, while funding both my relocation expenses and the initial investment in my San Francisco condominium. Marcus's betrayal had ultimately financed my liberation from our marriage and my advancement to a better life. The private investigator Rachel's final report provided closure on the fate of the other players in this drama, confirming that Jessica's relationship with Tyler Chen was following the same pattern of opportunistic attachment that had characterized her involvement with Marcus. Tyler's social media showed expensive trips and luxury purchases that were clearly funded by his resources, rather than her minimal income from wellness coaching. Her ability to move seamlessly from one wealthy partner to another demonstrated the calculated nature of her approach to relationships. Marcus's professional rehabilitation was proving much more difficult than his personal recovery, with several former clients refusing to work with him due to reliability concerns that had developed during his divorce proceedings. Kenneth's decision to start a competing firm was attracting their shared client base, leaving Marcus with a practice that generated barely enough income to meet his child support and alimony obligations. His reputation in Portland's engineering community had been permanently damaged by the chaos of his personal life. The moving truck that loaded my belongings for transport to San Francisco carried only those possessions that represented my individual identity and future aspirations. The Portland house that had once contained our shared dreams was left with furniture and fixtures that new owners would transform according to their own vision, erasing the final physical evidence of my marriage to Marcus. The drive south on Interstate 5 toward my new life felt like emerging from a tunnel that had confined my vision for years into bright sunlight that revealed possibilities I had never imagined, while managing the constraints of an unequal partnership. Every mile between Portland and San Francisco represented additional distance from the woman who had accommodated her husband's betrayal and additional progress toward the professional I was becoming through my own capabilities and determination. Diana Walsh's welcome reception at the San Francisco firm introduced me to colleagues whose expertise and ambition matched my own newly discovered professional confidence. The projects they described were exactly the kind of innovative work I had dreamed about but never pursued, while prioritizing my marriage's stability over my career advancement. The conversations revealed opportunities for growth and creative expression that had been impossible, while managing Marcus's emotional needs and professional insecurities. The view from my new condominium's floor-to-ceiling windows encompassed San Francisco Bay, the Golden Gate Bridge, and a cityscape that represented unlimited professional possibilities rather than the familiar limitations of a life constrained by someone else's choices and betrayals. The apartment's modern design reflected my individual aesthetic preferences without the compromises required by shared living, creating a space that was entirely my own for the first time since my early 20s. The final irony of my transformation became clear during my first week in San Francisco, when Marcus attempted to contact me through social media with a rambling message about regret and requests for forgiveness that revealed his ongoing failure to understand the magnitude of his betrayal or accept responsibility for its consequences. His assumption that I might be interested in reconciliation demonstrated the same narcissistic blindness that had allowed him to justify his affair and plan Jessica's residency in our home. My response was to block all forms of communication and file the message with Patricia as evidence of his violation of our non-disclosure agreement, potentially triggering financial penalties that would further reduce his already strained resources. The man who had once controlled so much of my emotional energy no longer deserved even the effort required to read his self-serving appeals for sympathy. The woman who had discovered her husband's betrayal through accidental eavesdropping in her own kitchen had evolved into someone who could systematically dismantle a marriage while protecting her interests and building a better future from the wreckage of broken trust. Marcus's assumption that I would passively accept his choices had proven to be the most expensive mistake of his life, while my strategic response had transformed his betrayal into the foundation for my most successful and independent years. 6 months after settling into San Francisco, my new life had taken shape in ways that exceeded even my most optimistic projections during those dark months of discovery and planning in Portland. The architectural firm had assigned me to lead the design team for a revolutionary eco-friendly housing development in Marin County, a project that would showcase sustainable living concepts while generating the kind of professional recognition I had always dreamed about but never actively pursued. The Marin project represented everything I had been missing during my years of accommodating Marcus's limited vision and conservative approach to risk. The developers wanted to create a community that would serve as a model for environmentally conscious luxury living, incorporating cutting-edge technology with artistic design elements that would attract affluent buyers committed to reducing their environmental impact. My role involved coordinating with landscape architects, environmental engineers, and renewable energy specialists to create an integrated approach that balanced aesthetic appeal with ecological responsibility. Working with this caliber of professionals reminded me how much I had intellectually stagnated during the final years of my marriage, when most of my creative energy had been devoted to managing Marcus's moods and maintaining domestic harmony, rather than pursuing challenging projects that could advance my career. The collaborative environment at Diana's firm encouraged bold thinking and innovative solutions that pushed my capabilities in directions I had never explored while operating within the constraints of a relationship that prioritized stability over growth. The financial rewards of my new position were substantial enough to support a lifestyle that surpassed what Marcus and I had achieved together, even during our most prosperous years. The combination of my increased salary, the divorce settlement proceeds, and the appreciation of my San Francisco condominium created wealth accumulation that provided both immediate comfort and long-term security. For the first time in my adult life, I could make purchases and travel decisions based purely on personal preference, rather than budget constraints or spousal consultation. The social opportunities available in San Francisco's professional community introduced me to people whose ambitions and interests aligned with my own newly discovered priorities. Industry networking events connected me with developers, investors, and design professionals who were working on projects throughout California and beyond. These relationships were built on mutual professional respect rather than the emotional dependency and compromise that had characterized my marriage to Marcus. More personally satisfying was my growing friendship with Elena Rodriguez, a successful real estate attorney who had gone through her own difficult divorce several years earlier. Elena's experience navigating the legal and emotional challenges of dissolving a marriage while building a thriving practice provided perspective on my own journey and validation that the strength I had discovered during my battle with Marcus was not temporary crisis management but genuine personal growth. Elena's circle of friends included women who had similarly transformed career setbacks or relationship failures into opportunities for advancement and independence. Their stories reinforced my understanding that Marcus's betrayal had ultimately liberated me from a limiting situation, rather than destroying my prospects for happiness. The supportive environment these friendships provided was completely different from the competitive and judgmental dynamics I had experienced among the couples who had formed our social circle in Portland. The distance between San Francisco and Portland created perfect insulation from the aftermath of my divorce, while allowing me to observe Marcus's continued decline through occasional updates from mutual acquaintances. His engineering practice was struggling to generate sufficient income to meet his obligations, forcing him to accept small residential projects that paid poorly and offered no opportunities for professional growth. The man who had once managed complex commercial developments was reduced to designing home additions and minor renovations for clients who chose him primarily based on low pricing rather than expertise. Kenneth's competing firm had successfully recruited most of their former shared clients, leaving Marcus with a practice that consisted mainly of referrals from attorneys representing people involved in property disputes or insurance claims. The steady, prestigious work that had supported our comfortable lifestyle had been replaced by irregular assignments that barely covered his overhead expenses and debt obligations. His professional reputation in Portland had been permanently damaged by the chaos of his personal life and his inability to maintain consistent service quality during the divorce proceedings. More troubling for Marcus was the revelation that Jessica's relationship with Tyler Chen had ended after only 4 months. With Jessica moving on to pursue an even wealthier target she had met through Tyler's social connections. The pattern of opportunistic attachment that had characterized her involvement with Marcus was becoming apparent to their mutual acquaintances, damaging her reputation as a wellness coach, and making it difficult for her to maintain the lifestyle she had grown accustomed to through her relationships with successful men. The private investigator Rachel's final intelligence reports revealed that Jessica had attempted to contact Marcus several times after Tyler Chen discovered her manipulative behavior and ended their relationship. Her approaches were apparently motivated by financial desperation rather than romantic regret, as her freelance graphic design work was insufficient to support the expensive lifestyle she had cultivated through her associations with wealthy men. Marcus had wisely ignored these contact attempts, perhaps finally understanding that Jessica's interest in him had always been transactional rather than emotional. Tyler Chen's decision to share details about Jessica's mercenary approach to relationships with his professional network had effectively blacklisted her from the social circles where she typically found her targets. The tech entrepreneur community in Portland was smaller and more interconnected than Jessica had realized, and her reputation for exploiting romantic relationships for financial gain had spread quickly among the demographic she depended upon for her lifestyle maintenance. The comprehensive failure of Jessica's strategy vindicated my analysis of her character and motivations, while providing additional satisfaction about the consequences both she and Marcus were facing. The woman who had seemed so confident while enjoying the benefits of my home and marriage was now struggling with the same financial insecurity that had originally motivated her pursuit of married men with stable resources. My professional achievements in San Francisco were generating recognition that extended beyond the immediate firm and local market. Architecture and design publications had begun featuring my work on sustainable housing projects, with several articles highlighting my innovative approaches to integrating environmental consciousness with luxury living concepts. The visibility was attracting inquiries from developers in other major cities, creating opportunities for consulting work that could significantly expand my career prospects. The success felt particularly meaningful because it was built entirely on my own capabilities and effort, rather than the shared resources and compromises that had defined my achievements during marriage. Every award, every published article, and every new professional opportunity represented validation of the decision to prioritize my own growth over the false security of a relationship based on accommodation and emotional labor. The investment opportunities available through my expanded income and divorce settlement allowed me to begin building wealth through real estate acquisitions rather than just earned income. Elena's legal expertise guided me toward properties in emerging neighborhoods that offered potential for significant appreciation, while generating rental income that would provide additional financial security. The portfolio I was assembling would ensure long-term prosperity regardless of future career changes or economic fluctuations. The romantic relationships I began exploring in San Francisco were fundamentally different from the dynamic I had experienced with Marcus, based on mutual respect and shared interests rather than the caretaking role I had assumed during our marriage. The men I met through professional and social activities were attracted to my independence and achievements, rather than viewing them as competition or sources of insecurity. One relationship in particular, with a sustainable technology entrepreneur named David Kim, offered the possibility of genuine partnership between equals, rather than the hierarchical arrangement that had characterized my marriage to Marcus. David's appreciation for my professional expertise and his own secure sense of identity created space for authentic connection without the emotional manipulation and control issues that had defined my previous relationship. The contrast between David's supportive response to my career success and Marcus's subtle undermining of my confidence illustrated how much I had grown in my understanding of healthy relationship dynamics. Where Marcus had viewed my achievements as threats to his position as primary breadwinner, David celebrated my accomplishments as evidence of the intelligence and drive that made me an interesting partner. The anniversary of discovering Marcus's affair, passed without emotional turmoil, marked instead by gratitude for the events that had forced me to reclaim control of my life and pursue opportunities I would never have considered, while managing the constraints of an unsatisfying marriage. The woman who had been devastated by her husband's betrayal had been replaced by someone who understood that his deception had ultimately been a gift that freed her from a relationship that was limiting her potential. The final correspondence from Patricia included documentation that Marcus had defaulted on his alimony obligations twice, triggering penalty clauses that increased his debt while providing additional resources for my continued prosperity. His inability to meet his financial commitments reflected the ongoing consequences of choices he had made during our marriage, ensuring that his betrayal would continue generating benefits for my future, while creating ongoing challenges for his own stability. The Portland house where Marcus had planned to install his mistress had been purchased by a young family who were transforming it into exactly the kind of happy home I had once imagined sharing with him. Their renovation plans included converting Jessica's former yoga studio back into a proper guest bedroom and removing the meditation space Marcus had created in the backyard. The physical evidence of his affair was being erased by people who would fill the space with authentic love and partnership rather than deception and betrayal. The woman who had discovered her husband's betrayal through accidental eavesdropping in her own kitchen had evolved into someone who could systematically dismantle a marriage while protecting her interests and building a better future from the wreckage of broken trust. Marcus's assumption that I would passively accept his choices had proven to be the most expensive mistake of his life, while my strategic response had transformed his betrayal into the foundation for my most successful and independent years. The quiet wife he had underestimated had become a formidable woman who understood that the best revenge was not emotional satisfaction, but a life so successful and fulfilling that his absence felt like liberation rather than loss. 2 years after the divorce finalization, an unexpected encounter at San Francisco International Airport provided the perfect capstone to my transformation story. I was returning from a design conference in Tokyo, where I had presented my sustainable housing concepts to an international audience of architects and developers. The trip had been both professionally rewarding and personally satisfying, representing the kind of global recognition that would have been impossible while managing the emotional demands of my marriage to Marcus. Standing in the customs line with my presentation materials and samples of innovative building technologies I had discovered in Japan, I noticed a familiar figure struggling with oversized luggage several positions ahead of me. Marcus appeared to have aged significantly more than the 2 years that had passed since our final court appearance, his hair showing premature gray and his posture reflecting the weight of ongoing stress and disappointment. He was traveling alone, wearing clothes that suggested financial constraints, rather than the professional image he had always maintained during our marriage. The expensive briefcase he had carried for years had been replaced with a worn laptop bag, and his overall appearance indicated someone whose circumstances had continued to deteriorate rather than stabilize after our divorce settlement. The irony of our respective situations was immediately apparent to anyone observing our parallel progress through the airport. I moved efficiently through the diplomatic passport line, a privilege earned through my consulting work with international development organizations, while Marcus waited in the standard queue with documents that suggested domestic business travel, rather than the international projects that had once defined his career aspirations. My decision to approach him was motivated by curiosity rather than any desire for confrontation or reconciliation. The woman who had once been devastated by his betrayal felt only detached interest in learning how his life had evolved, since our paths had diverged so dramatically. The emotional charge that had once accompanied any thought of Marcus had been completely replaced by the clinical assessment one might apply to any former acquaintance whose choices had led to predictable consequences. His reaction to seeing me was a complex mixture of surprise, embarrassment, and what appeared to be genuine regret for opportunities lost through his own poor judgment. The confident engineer who had once dismissed my concerns about our marriage had been replaced by someone who clearly understood that his current struggles were the direct result of decisions he had made during our relationship's final years. Our brief conversation revealed that Marcus was traveling to meet with potential clients for a small consulting contract that might provide enough income to meet his ongoing financial obligations. The prestigious engineering projects that had once been routine assignments were now rare opportunities that required extensive travel and aggressive competition with firms that had maintained their professional reputations during economic uncertainties. His inquiry about my own travels provided an opportunity to share details about the international recognition my work was receiving and the expanding scope of projects I was managing across multiple continents. The sustainable housing concepts I had developed were being implemented in cities throughout Asia and Europe, generating both professional satisfaction and financial returns that exceeded anything I had achieved while accommodating the limitations of our shared life. Marcus's response to hearing about my success was gracious but tinged with the recognition that his betrayal had cost him access to the partnership and prosperity we might have built together if he had chosen differently. The man who had once taken my support and contributions for granted was now clearly aware of what he had lost through his pursuit of short-term gratification with someone who had never valued him as anything more than a temporary resource. The encounter lasted only a few minutes, but it provided perfect closure to the chapter of my life that had begun with his deception and ended with my strategic victory in our divorce proceedings. Seeing Marcus reduced to struggling for basic professional survival while I thrived in an international career built on my own capabilities confirmed that every difficult decision I had made during our separation had been correct. More importantly, the complete absence of any romantic feeling or nostalgic sentiment during our conversation proved that my emotional healing was complete. The man who had once controlled so much of my happiness and self-worth had been reduced to someone whose welfare was no more significant to me than any stranger encountered during routine travel. The psychological freedom this represented was more valuable than any financial benefit I had gained through our divorce settlement. Flying back to San Francisco that evening, I reflected on how completely my life had been transformed through the systemic response to betrayal that had initially seemed like the end of my stability and security. The career achievements I had accumulated, the financial independence I had built, and the authentic relationships I had developed, all represented opportunities that would have been impossible while managing the emotional labor and compromises required by my marriage to Marcus. The Marin County housing project was nearing completion, with early residents already moving into the first phase of sustainable luxury homes that incorporated my design innovations. The success of this development was attracting inquiries from developers in other major metropolitan areas, creating opportunities for expansion that could establish my firm as a national leader in environmentally conscious residential design. Elena Rodriguez had become not just a close friend, but a business partner in real estate investments that were generating substantial passive income, while building long-term wealth through strategic property acquisitions. Our collaboration combined her legal expertise with my understanding of design and development trends, creating a partnership that was both professionally profitable and personally supportive in ways that my marriage had never achieved. The relationship with David Kim had evolved into a genuine partnership based on mutual respect and shared values, rather than the emotional dependency and control issues that had characterized my marriage to Marcus. David's own success in sustainable technology development created opportunities for collaboration between our respective fields while maintaining the independence that was essential for my continued personal growth. Our engagement, announced 6 months after my airport encounter with Marcus, represented a commitment between equals who chose to build something together rather than individuals seeking completion through romantic attachment. The wedding planning process revealed how much I had learned about maintaining personal identity within a committed relationship, insisting on arrangements that reflected both our preferences rather than defaulting to accommodation and compromise. The venue we selected was a restored Victorian mansion in Napa Valley that showcased sustainable renovation techniques while providing elegant surroundings for a celebration that honored both tradition and innovation. The guest list included colleagues from the international design community, friends from Elena's legal network, and family members who had supported my transformation from betrayed wife to successful entrepreneur. Notably absent from our wedding celebration was any representative from my previous life in Portland, a conscious decision that reflected my complete separation from the relationships and identity that had been built around my marriage to Marcus. The woman who had once worried about maintaining social connections despite her husband's betrayal had evolved into someone who understood that authentic relationships were built on genuine compatibility rather than shared history or social convenience. The honeymoon trip to Scandinavia combined personal celebration with professional research, as David and I toured innovative sustainable housing developments in Denmark and Sweden that were implementing concepts similar to my own design philosophy. The integration of romantic travel with career advancement represented the kind of mutual support and shared interests that had been missing from my marriage to Marcus. Professional recognition continued to accelerate, with invitations to speak at conferences in major cities throughout North America and Europe. The sustainable housing movement was gaining momentum among affluent consumers who wanted to reduce their environmental impact without sacrificing luxury amenities, creating market demand that aligned perfectly with my expertise and design philosophy. The financial portfolio I had built through divorce settlement proceeds, increased earnings, and strategic investments was generating enough passive income to support a comfortable lifestyle even without continued employment. This economic independence provided the freedom to pursue projects based on their potential for innovation and impact rather than immediate financial necessity, opening possibilities for experimental work that could advance the entire field of sustainable design. A particularly satisfying development was the invitation to join the board of directors for a nonprofit organization focused on affordable, sustainable housing for low-income communities. This position allowed me to apply my expertise toward addressing social inequality while building relationships with philanthropists and policymakers who shared my commitment to environmental responsibility and social justice. The organization's projects included developing housing solutions for homeless populations, creating transitional facilities for families escaping domestic violence, and building permanent affordable housing in urban areas where gentrification was displacing long-term residents. My role involved designing structures that maximized functionality and dignity, while minimizing construction and operating costs through innovative use of sustainable technologies. This volunteer work provided perspective on how fortunate I had been to have the resources and education necessary to rebuild my life after Marcus's betrayal, while also demonstrating that the skills I had developed through that crisis could benefit others facing different but equally challenging circumstances. The strategic thinking and emotional resilience that had enabled my victory over Marcus's deception were applicable to broader problems that required creative solutions and persistent effort. The contrast between my current life and the constraints I had accepted during my marriage became more apparent with each passing year. The woman who had once organized her schedule around her husband's preferences and career demands was now setting her own priorities based on professional opportunities and personal interests that Marcus had never understood or supported. International consulting assignments took me to cities throughout Asia, Europe, and South America, where I worked with governments and private developers to implement sustainable housing policies and design standards. These projects provided both intellectual stimulation and cultural experiences that expanded my understanding of global environmental challenges while building professional relationships that would support continued career growth. The expertise I had developed in sustainable luxury design was becoming increasingly relevant as climate change concerns motivated affluent consumers to seek housing solutions that combined environmental responsibility with aesthetic appeal. This market positioning ensured continued demand for my services while allowing me to contribute to environmental protection efforts through practical applications of innovative design concepts. Marcus's continued struggles, reported occasionally through mutual acquaintances who remained in Portland, served as a reminder of the consequences that followed poor decision-making and ethical failures. His engineering practice had never recovered from the reputation damage caused by his personal chaos, and his financial obligations from our divorce settlement continued to limit his ability to rebuild his professional standing or personal stability. The woman who had discovered her husband's affair through accidental observation in her own kitchen had become someone whose success story was inspiring other women facing similar betrayals to pursue strategic responses, rather than accepting victimhood. Speaking engagements at women's organizations and professional conferences often included personal elements about overcoming relationship challenges while building independent careers, demonstrating that betrayal could become a catalyst for growth rather than permanent damage. The quiet wife who had been dismissed and underestimated had evolved into a formidable professional whose achievements proved that the best response to betrayal was not revenge or reconciliation, but the systematic construction of a better life built on authentic values and genuine capabilities. Marcus's assumption about my passivity had been the most expensive mistake of his life, while my strategic response had transformed his deception into the foundation for unprecedented success and personal fulfillment. 5 years after our divorce became final, an unexpected letter arrived at my San Francisco office that would provide the ultimate validation of every strategic decision I had made during those difficult months of discovery and planning. The envelope bore the letterhead of Hoffman & Associates, Bradley Hoffman's law firm, and contained a formal request for financial assistance that revealed just how completely Marcus's world had collapsed since our paths had diverged. The letter explained that Marcus was facing bankruptcy proceedings due to his inability to meet accumulated debt obligations, including the fraudulent loan he had secured, using our former home as collateral. His engineering practice had finally failed entirely, with his last remaining clients departing after a series of project delays and quality issues that reflected his ongoing inability to focus on professional responsibilities while managing personal financial crises. More significantly, Hoffman was requesting that I consider voluntary reduction of the alimony payments that Marcus still owed, arguing that his current circumstances made compliance impossible, and that continued legal enforcement would serve no constructive purpose. The document included financial statements that painted a picture of complete economic collapse, with Marcus's monthly expenses exceeding his irregular income by substantial amounts. Reading through the bankruptcy filing attachments, I discovered that Jessica had actually attempted to sue Marcus for emotional distress and financial promises related to their relationship, claiming that he had made commitments about supporting her lifestyle that he had subsequently failed to honor. Her lawsuit had been dismissed by the court, but the legal defense costs had further depleted Marcus's already strained resources. The irony was exquisite. The woman who had manipulated Marcus into betraying his marriage was now trying to extract additional financial compensation for the inconvenience of his inability to continue funding her lifestyle after their relationship ended. Jessica's lawsuit revealed the depths of her opportunistic approach to personal relationships, while demonstrating that Marcus had been as naive about her character as I had once been about his integrity. My response to Hoffman's request was drafted by Elena, whose legal expertise ensured that our position was both legally sound and personally satisfying. The letter politely declined any modification to our existing agreement while noting that Marcus's financial difficulties were the predictable consequences of choices he had made during and after our marriage. The alimony payments would continue as scheduled until their legal expiration date, regardless of his current circumstances. Elena's research revealed that Marcus had actually attempted to hide assets during the bankruptcy proceedings, transferring ownership of some equipment and intellectual property to relatives in an effort to protect them from creditors. This discovery prompted us to file additional motions that would ensure my alimony claims took priority over other creditors, potentially extending Marcus's financial obligations even beyond their originally scheduled termination. The bankruptcy proceedings became a matter of public record, providing detailed documentation of how Marcus's life had deteriorated since our divorce. The man who had once managed multi-million-dollar engineering projects was now working part-time for a landscaping company, using his truck to deliver materials and perform manual labor that paid barely above minimum wage. His living situation had devolved to a studio apartment in a declining neighborhood, with rent payments that consumed most of his irregular income, while leaving little for food, transportation, or the professional expenses necessary to rebuild his engineering career. The comfortable lifestyle we had shared, which he had risked for a relationship with Jessica, had been replaced by genuine poverty that would likely persist for years. Meanwhile, my own trajectory continued its upward arc, with developments that exceeded even my most optimistic projections during those early months of rebuilding in San Francisco. The sustainable housing firm I had established was now operating internationally, with projects on 4 continents and a staff of talented architects and engineers who shared my commitment to environmental innovation and design excellence. The United Nations had invited me to serve on an advisory committee focused on sustainable urban development in emerging economies, a position that provided platforms for influencing policy decisions that could affect millions of people, while building relationships with world leaders who were implementing environmental protection initiatives. This appointment represented the kind of global recognition that would have been impossible while managing the emotional constraints of my marriage to Marcus. David and I had purchased a second home in Costa Rica, where we were developing an experimental community that would serve as a living laboratory for sustainable technologies, while providing a retreat for international colleagues working on similar projects. The property featured cutting-edge renewable energy systems, innovative water management technologies, and agricultural techniques that demonstrated how luxury living could be achieved without environmental damage. Our Costa Rica project attracted attention from documentary filmmakers who were creating a series about individuals whose personal transformations had led to broader social impact. The filming process required me to revisit the story of discovering Marcus's betrayal and the strategic response that had ultimately led to my current success, providing perspective on how completely my life had been transformed through systematic planning and persistent execution. The documentary segment focused on the decision-making process that had enabled me to convert personal crises into professional opportunity, emphasizing the importance of strategic thinking and long-term planning when facing life-altering challenges. The producers were particularly interested in how betrayal had revealed strengths I hadn't known I possessed, while motivating me to pursue ambitions I had previously considered beyond my capabilities. Speaking engagements related to the documentary's release brought invitations from universities and professional organizations throughout North America and Europe, where I addressed audiences of students and professionals about resilience, strategic planning, and the potential for personal transformation during crisis periods. These presentations often included specific advice about protecting one's interests during relationship dissolution, while building foundations for future success. The speaking circuit provided opportunities to meet other women, whose stories of overcoming betrayal and rebuilding their lives shared common elements with my own experience. These connections led to the establishment of a mentorship network that paired women facing relationship challenges with others who had successfully navigated similar difficulties, creating support systems that combined emotional encouragement with practical guidance about legal and financial strategies. One particularly memorable mentorship case involved a woman named Sarah Chen, whose husband had embezzled funds from their joint business to support a gambling addiction and extramarital relationship. Sarah's situation required complex financial forensics and legal maneuvering that drew heavily on my own experience with documenting financial misconduct and protecting assets during divorce proceedings. Working with Sarah's legal team, we developed strategies for recovering hidden assets while building evidence of her husband's misconduct that would support claims for disproportionate settlement terms. The case required 18 months of investigation and litigation, but ultimately resulted in Sarah retaining control of their business while her ex-husband faced both civil and criminal consequences for his financial deception. Sarah's successful outcome led to referrals from other attorneys who were representing women in complex divorce cases involving financial misconduct or hidden assets. My consulting work in these situations combined my professional expertise in project management with hard-won knowledge about investigation techniques and legal strategies that could protect women's interests during relationship dissolution. The consulting practice evolved into a formal business, offering comprehensive support services for women facing difficult divorces, including referrals to appropriate legal representation, financial planning guidance, and emotional support through support groups and individual counseling. The enterprise generated substantial revenue while providing personally meaningful work that helped other women avoid the mistakes I had made while learning to protect their interests more effectively. Elena and I expanded our real estate investment partnership to include properties specifically designed for women transitioning out of difficult relationships, creating temporary housing solutions that provided safety and stability while residents rebuilt their financial independence. These facilities offered not just accommodation, but comprehensive support services, including job training, childcare assistance, and legal advocacy that addressed the complex challenges faced by women escaping abusive or manipulative relationships. The real estate portfolio had grown to include luxury properties in major metropolitan areas that generated substantial rental income, while appreciating significantly in value due to our strategic selection of emerging neighborhoods and innovative renovation approaches. The passive income from these investments provided financial security that would support any future career changes or personal decisions without creating economic stress or dependency. Professional recognition continued to accumulate through awards from architectural organizations, environmental groups, and women's professional associations that honored both my design innovations and my advocacy work supporting women facing relationship challenges. These accolades were personally satisfying but also served practical purposes by attracting new clients and speaking opportunities that expanded my influence and income potential. The 5th anniversary of my divorce from Marcus coincided with the completion of my largest international project, a sustainable housing development in Singapore that would serve as a model for climate-conscious urban planning throughout Southeast Asia. The project's success led to additional contracts in the region while establishing my firm as a leader in sustainable design for tropical climates. Celebrating this milestone with David and our circle of friends in San Francisco, I reflected on the journey that had begun with such pain and uncertainty in that Portland kitchen where I had discovered Marcus's betrayal. The woman who had been devastated by her husband's deception had become someone whose expertise was sought by governments and international organizations addressing some of the world's most pressing environmental challenges. The transformation hadn't been easy or automatic, requiring persistent effort and strategic thinking during periods when the outcome remained uncertain. But every difficult decision had ultimately proven correct. From the initial choice to investigate Marcus's behavior rather than accepting his explanations, to the decision to pursue maximum settlement terms rather than accepting quick compromise, to the commitment to rebuilding my career on my own terms rather than seeking security through another relationship. Marcus's current circumstances, occasionally reported through mutual acquaintances who remained in Portland, served as a cautionary tale about the long-term consequences of betrayal and deception. His financial struggles were continuing despite the bankruptcy proceedings, with creditors pursuing collection actions that would likely affect his ability to rebuild his professional standing for years to come. More importantly, his reputation in Portland's business community had been permanently damaged by the combination of his personal misconduct and subsequent financial failures. The engineering projects that had once provided both income and professional satisfaction were no longer available to someone whose reliability and judgment had been called into question by his own choices and their predictable consequences. The woman who had once worried about maintaining social connections despite her husband's infidelity had evolved into someone whose authentic relationships were built on mutual respect and shared values rather than convenience or social obligation. The friends and colleagues who surrounded my current life were attracted to my accomplishments in character rather than my marital status or social position. Looking ahead to the next phase of my career and personal development, I was considering opportunities to establish a foundation focused on supporting women's entrepreneurship in developing countries, combining my expertise in sustainable design with advocacy for economic empowerment and gender equality. This initiative would represent the ultimate evolution of the strategic thinking and resilience that had enabled my recovery from Marcus's betrayal. The quiet wife who had been dismissed and underestimated had become a formidable force for positive change, whose influence extended far beyond her own recovery from personal betrayal. Marcus's assumption about my weakness had proven to be not just wrong but catastrophically expensive, while my strategic response had created opportunities for impact and fulfillment that exceeded anything I had imagined possible during the constrained years of our marriage. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.